An Egyptian court sentences 14 people to death on charges of carrying out attacks on security forces in the Sinai Peninsula last year. The court in the city of Ismailia also gave life sentences to 4 other members of the group called At-Tawheed wa Jihad. Sources say 8 of the 14 death sentences were in absentia. Over 24 people were charged in connection with the deadly attacks on a police station in June of last year. The group is opposed to Cairo-Tel Aviv ties and is accused of targeting pipelines carrying gas to Israel. Violence flared up in the Sinai again last month when 16 border police were killed. Egypt has beefed up its security presence in the peninsula. Dozens of insurgents have been killed and dozens were arrested in the Egyptian military operations. Well, to discuss this further, now we're being joined by Dr. Webster Tarpley. He's an author and historian joining us via Skype from Washington. Dr. Tarpley, thank you very much for joining us here on Press TV. Now, the Sinai Peninsula hasn't seen a lot of peace in the past year since the revolution in Egypt began. We've seen attacks on pipelines, attacks on security forces, amongst other things. Who are these groups that have been wreaking what many call chaos within the Sinai Peninsula and have now been sentenced, 14 of them been sentenced to death in an Egyptian court?
Sometimes they present themselves as Bedouins, the indigenous people of the zone, and they often come dressed up as Bedouins, but I think that the reality is probably more complex. First of all, the Morsi government is understandably concerned to assert their authority over the entire national territory of Egypt. And that, I think, it explains the draconian sentences. If you don't get armed gangs under control, then you risk going the way of Libya, where you've got armed gangs running all over the place, or indeed of Syria, where you've got the same thing in a different form. But I think we also have to look at the map and remind ourselves of the tremendous strategic importance of the Suez Canal. We're talking here about the Sinai Peninsula, which is that area between the Suez Canal going east over to the Israeli border. And this is a very strategic piece of real estate. I am guessing to a certain extent, but I have the impression that the NATO people have been interested in infiltrating some foreign fighters into the zone. Some of these groups that claim to do these things are not well known. And the disturbances along the Suez Canal and Sinai, and they're linked, began around the time of Tahrir Square, February 2011. There was a strike at the Suez Canal. The tolls were not collected and the maintenance work was not done. You've also had a series of attacks on this pipeline that goes from Egypt to Israel. The cover story is always that this is anti-Israeli, so of course it's going to be popular. But I see something underneath which is much more sinister. If Egypt cannot maintain order along the Suez Canal and in the Sinai, then NATO acquires a case for saying, oh, you see, what we've been saying since 1956 is true. The Egyptians cannot guarantee the orderly functioning of the canal, and therefore we may have to step in to restore order. Now, if NATO could control the Suez Canal, they could decide who gets through and who does not. China would not get through. Iran would not get through. Syria would not get through. Cargoes that NATO does not like could get through. The possibilities are limitless, and it's huge. It's 8% of the world maritime traffic. But in that particular area, it's a lot more, and it's very, very strategic. So I would say, if you ask who has an interest in stirring up constant guerrilla warfare of the kind we've had in July and August of this year especially, I would say NATO intelligence is number one on the list.
Right, and very, very quickly, if you can, Dr. Tarpley, why is it that these dots haven't been connected by other media organizations, etc.? Why hasn't this come to light?
I don't know. I began writing about this in February 2011. You can look at it on my website. I began speculating what is going on here with the canal, right? Because when the imperialists look at Egypt, they say, what's valuable? The water of the Nile and the Suez Canal. And the Nile, of course, is a more complex proposition. But the Suez Canal is a relatively compact piece of land and the water going through it, and therefore, given the mentality of U.S. British imperialism, obsessed with partition, subdivision, secession, microstates, mini-states, and all the rest of it, it's inevitable that they begin thinking, wouldn't it be great if we could go back to the good old days before Nasser and have the imperialists control the canal? No more China, no more Iran, no more anybody that they don't like. It would increase their power to blackmail large parts of the world.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Dr. Webster Tarpley, author and historian, joining us there via Skype from Washington. Dr. Tarpley, many thanks indeed for your comments here on Press TV.